And welcome back to part 3 of this video series on creating your PMP exam study plan. In part 1, I talked about exam success tips. In part 2, it was important topics for the exam. And today in part 3, I'm going to speak about what's new in the PMBOK guide 6th edition. The PMBOK guide, which is also the guide to the project management body of knowledge from PMI. The 6th edition was introduced last year in September, so 2017. So I'm going to talk today about what's the change in this new edition compared to the 5th edition. First and foremost, the 6th edition comes with one more attachment, which is known as the Agile Practice Guide. I'm not going into detail about that practice guide, but I will focus only on the PMBOK Guide 6th edition, the main document. Now, this is going to benefit you in two ways. Those who do not have access to the PMBOK at all, who have never studied the PMBOK, they will see what is trending or what are the popular practices in the project management world. But those who are familiar with the PMBOK 5th edition will get to know what's new has come in. So it benefits both of you. Now, before I go into details about what has been added and what has changed, what has been taken out, let me give you a quick structure about the PMBOK guide. The PMBOK guide has the 3 chapters, which are the introductory chapters, and then it's got 10 additional chapters on the knowledge area. So the initial chapters are known as introduction, the project environment, and the role of the project manager. And afterwards, we have all those knowledge area topics like integration management, scope management, schedule management, cost, quality, resources, communication, risk, procurement, and stakeholder. Before I get into all that detail, I want to give you basically what has changed in the initial chapter. The initial chapters, the introductory chapter remains the same, but there are some new things introduced into it. For example, tailoring. The concept of tailoring has been introduced. There is also the introduction of the business documents like the business case and the benefits management plan. Then there is also the differentiation between the project life cycle and the development life cycle, which is more technical compared to the project life cycle. Then there's also an exposure to the Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct, even though there's a separate publication from PMI on the Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. Moving on, chapter number 2 was previously known as Organizational Influences. Now it is called the Project Environment. What has changed here? Those who know the PMBOK 5th edition will recollect the various types of organization structures. They are here also, but then there are some new types of structures known as virtual, multi-divisional, and so on. Apart from that, there is also some more things like organizational systems, the 3 elements of those systems. And then we have got PMO concept. PMO was initially part of the chapter 1, now it is moved to chapter 2. Chapter number 3 originally was the project management processes. Now all that has moved to chapter 1, but then the chapter 3 is a fresh chapter which is known as the role of the project manager. The role of the project manager is a key chapter. It's quite detailed in terms of the sphere of influence of the project manager. So within the project, the PM has certain influence. It's also outside the project boundary across the organization. It's also outside the organization into the discipline and into the industry. And then we have got the information about the PMI talent triangle, where we have got the 3 competencies for a project manager. This is copyrighted by PMI. So it's got the technical project management competency, it's got the business and strategic competency, and it has got the leadership competency of a project manager. There is also information about various styles of leadership in this 3rd chapter, and also a differentiation between management versus leadership. So that finishes off the 3 initial chapters with respect to what's new or what has changed there. I just remembered one more thing in the chapter 1 introduction. There is also the description about phase gates. You know, the gate 1 over, gate 2 over, phase over, and so on. Those have been explained in much more detail. Alright, now let's look at the remaining 10 chapters, the 10 knowledge areas, what's new there. The first thing is, every knowledge area has now an additional section which has 4 parts. And what are they? Key concepts of that knowledge area, and then it's got tailoring for that knowledge area, and then considerations for agile and adaptive environments for that knowledge area, and finally trends and emerging practices for that knowledge area. So these 4 you will see in all the knowledge areas now. The second thing is the ITTOs, the input, tools and techniques and outputs. There is some change in those diagrams, basically the structuring, the way they are presented. The inputs are now grouped. You will see grouping of project management plans, grouping of project documents. Similarly, outputs, you will see grouping of project management plans, grouping of project documents. And then the middle box, tools and techniques, several new techniques have been introduced. Some techniques have gone away. Now these techniques are grouped into various types. You've got data analysis techniques like root cause analysis. You've got data representation techniques like a risk hierarchy chart or a bubble chart. We have got data gathering techniques like interviews and meetings, and we have got communication skills like presentation skills, and then we have got decision making techniques like voting and so on. And then there is also the ungrouped techniques like audits, etc., which are not part of any of these data or decision making categories. One last thing about the ITOs, some of you might remember the issue log. The issue log was an output of managed stakeholder engagement, but now issue log is an output of direct and managed project work. Though the issue log can be updated in several processes, but where it originated from. So those of you who are familiar with the older edition, please be careful. There are changes to where these documents are coming out from. So that finishes off the ITTO aspect. Now I'm coming to each knowledge area. Let's begin with integration management. Integration management has got a new process added, which is managed projects knowledge. Apart from that, it has also got some changes to the project management plan development. The project management plan has got some additional components which were non-existent before. Moving on, scope management. In scope management, there is a lot more consideration about agile project scope management. Understand that more carefully, how these 6 scope management processes work in agile projects versus traditional waterfall projects. Then moving on to schedule management. Previously it was known as time management, but now it is called project schedule management. There is not much change there. Of course, the 4 sections do appear, which are there in all the knowledge areas, the tailoring, the key concepts, the agile environment considerations, and the trends and emerging practices. Apart from that, you will see critical chain method is also not appearing anymore, but it's been replaced with terminology known as the theory of constraints, but critical chain is not mentioned at all. Moving on to cost management. Cost management, there is not much change there apart from the new sections which have been added as in all the other knowledge areas. But then there are some things like earned value analysis. You might have to study what are the recent trends in earned value analysis. I'm actually not talking about these additional 4 sections in each knowledge area because there is too much of that. But process wise, there are no changes in cost management. Moving on to resource management. In resource management, we have got a lot of change in the process nomenclature. Processes like acquire project team, develop project team, manage project team, they are now known as acquire resources, manage team, and develop team. And then we have a new process introduced which is known as control resources, and that is about physical resource management. Therefore, this resource management chapter is not only about people resources, it is also about physical and material resources. Therefore, the name of the knowledge area itself has changed from human resource management to resource management. Moving on to quality management. Quality management has got some good changes. You no longer see the process called perform quality assurance, but we have a new process name which is manage quality. Manage quality actually encompasses the quality assurance aspect, but it also encompasses the design aspect. Therefore, we have got the plan quality management like before, but we have got manage quality now, which is actually about creating detailed descriptions of the various quality activities, which will be executed in quality control. And there are some new outputs like quality reports. So that's what is quality. There are a lot of new techniques in the quality management area now. Moving on to communications management, the next knowledge area. Communications management, now there is a lot more science of communication management introduced in this chapter. For example, the 5 C's of communications. And then apart from that, a new set of techniques, and also the control communications process has been termed as monitor communications. The word monitor is being applied wherever it is not possible to fully control, right? For example, people cannot be controlled, but physical resources can be controlled. So you've got control resources, but then communications has to be monitored, risk has to be monitored, stakeholder engagement has to be monitored. These 3, stakeholder, risk, and communications, are better monitored than being controlled because of the nature of the knowledge area. The next one is risk management. As you know, risk management used to be a long chapter. It is still a long chapter with several processes, but a new process has been introduced which is called implement risk responses. Previously, risk responses were implemented in other executing processes like a direct and manage project work, or it could be control risks. But now we no longer have control risks process, we have a monitor risks process and also a new process which is implement risk responses. Apart from that, we have got the concept of risk escalation. Previously, if you remember, we had risk acceptance and mitigation and so on, but we have got now risk escalation as well. And the overall concept of risk management has been improved. There is also consideration for non-event risks. Previously, it was only about event-based risks, basically for unplanned things. But now even the planned items might have risk. For example, let's say I'm a project manager, I'm doing testing and I might have some risks for testing. I might expect maybe 3 or 4 defects in that test. But what if there are maybe 25 defects in that test? Such risks are known as non-event based risks. So because of this, we have variability risk and ambiguity risk introduced. Also, projects need to be more solid and strong in order to minimize the risks in the project. So that is known as project resilience. So project resilience has been also introduced in risk management. Procurement management. I've got in procurement management is wonderfully done now. There's a lot more introduction about various aspects of procurement management. For example, the different types of documents which are used, the procurement documents, and also the nature of the procurement process is made more international rather than North American or American, for example. And there's also due consideration to the proposal selection or the source selection criteria, which is very solid now. Different ways of selecting the vendors has been clarified. And also one last change there is the controlled procurement process. Previously, we had the closed procurement process, but that no longer exists. The closed procurement has now been merged with controlled procurement, which takes care of closing contracts also. Eventually, I have the last chapter in the PMBOK guide, which is the stakeholder management. Stakeholder management, there is in the identification of stakeholders, there is additional technique introduced like stakeholder mapping. There are a few more techniques also introduced in various stakeholder management processes, which makes it more comprehensive now. And also, as I was telling you earlier, control stakeholder engagement has become monitor stakeholder engagement. So there's more an engagement approach than a management approach. So these are the various changes which have occurred in the introductory chapters and the 3 chapters and the knowledge areas. Right? There may be some other changes as well which I have not highlighted. For example, in the scope management, there is more information about what is the role of the business analyst versus the project manager. There's also these emerging practices and trends, agile considerations. Please note them in every chapter. There's a lot of information on these aspects, also about tailoring and key concepts in every knowledge area chapter. With that, I would like to finish this session. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to watch video number 1. The first series of videos has about 7 videos, which is about exam success tips. The second video is just a single video, which is about important topics for the exam, important areas for the exam. And today's video was about what's new in the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. Next week, I'm going to come back with another video, which is about tools and techniques. I'm going to talk about the different categories of tools and techniques, and how to differentiate between similar sounding tools and techniques, for example, affinity diagrams versus matrix diagrams versus influence diagram. And finally, how do we apply the same technique in different way depending on the situation. For example, affinity diagram could be used in one way in quality management and in another way in scope management. So I'm going to talk about all that in the next video next week. Until then, stay solid, do solid preparation, and wish you good luck for your exam and for your preparation. Thank you.